Food for thought. Hello, my lovely party members and party animals, coming at you from Blue Fox. Today we are going to be venturing into my food for thought segment. Today's topic is the law of attraction. I'm going to be talking to you also a little bit about comfort and assurance. So what this entails, basically I was just inspired to create a space where people have the opportunity to tune their minds to something that encourages them instead of installing fear, which seems to be the narrative of TV, social media, YouTube ads, like commercials. They're kind of full of, they're interesting, I'll just say the least. So whether you believe in energy or not, it is there, and I'm going to teach you how to be an alchemist with it. The law of attraction, just as real as the law of gravity, but much like gravity, it is unseen until observed while in its effect. So let's first talk about comfort. Wherever you are, if you can just submerge yourself into your surroundings, what do you see? What do you hear, smell, taste, feel? Are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you driving? Go into detail. So in this moment, if you can know that every single thing is working out for you, just let it be so. Paint that picture. Put it on a canvas in your mind. Start with it completely blank. Yep. As soon as I said that, something completely random popped up, didn't it? No worries. Just focus. Focus on everything being absolutely perfect for you. What would that feel like? Like every single little thing is being taken care of and is already resolved. It's unseen. Just know it's resolved. What would it be like to have all your bills paid? What would it mean to be peaceful in your relationship? Would it be freeing to have this kind of clarity? I think so. And I mean, like, really use your imagination. Like, everything is absolutely perfect. You have the car that you want. You have a place to stay. You have a nice home. You're enjoying what you're doing every day, day in, day out. What would that feel like? And as you actually like sit and start to experience this thought in detail, and I mean like really go into detail, you've got a nice house that you want. I want you to put yourself in the house. What does it look like? Like, what does your living room look like? Like, do you have a cool couch? Do you have like Deadpool poster up? You probably should have a Deadpool poster up. I'm just saying. What kind of gaming consoles in your living room? How big is your TV? Like, what does this moment look and feel like to you? And I just want you to stay there for a minute. And I want you to see as much as you can, like spin around in this house that you've built. Like, what kind of car is in the driveway? What are you doing at this current moment in your imagination? And if you have to pause this, I want you to take as long as you need until you can see exactly where you are in that particular thought. Because the next step is going to be knowing in that moment that you just had exactly what you desire. You were in a reality inside of your mind where it was already done. You see it in the mind, then you claim it and know it is done. And you're probably asking the same question that I have been asking for the past couple years until it just finally clicked. How do you know it's done when you aren't seeing it with your physical eyes and your physical reality? Well, that, my dears, where quantum mechanics kind of ties in a little bit. And here's where we get nerdy. So I believe, so it seems that science, as far as the quantum mechanics theory, kind of ties in with the just mechanics of the universe, which kind of ties into spirituality. But quantum mechanics, basically mechanics of the universe that studies the atomic and subatomic interactions of energy and their seemingly strange behavior when being observed, down to like particle form. I know it's weird, probably wondering what that has to do with anything that I said prior. Well, Einstein was a genius, as we all know. Even though some people thought he was freaking insane, he was damn near obsessed with the quantum field theory and quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement is the key word. So I'll get into the quantum field theory a little later. But Quantum entanglement basically is the ability of separated objects to share a condition or a space. And if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, he kind of explains it a little differently, but basically it's a kind of a template. So he explains it as a field in which energy and information that exists independently from space and time. So now we're going to connect the dots a little bit. So let's not say if the theory is true, because if you know me, I'm going to tell you how my reality is. It's my true reality, and I want to make you the observer in this moment. So now it's true for you too. Okay, I need you to sit in the driver's seat real quick. And my speakers, and my speakers. Hey, I'm just riding around town, shouting, doing my thing in my Mustang. So if you are in my reality as me, now observing what I'm observing from my mind, I'm going to tell you that that theory is a fact. So this means the reality that you just created in your head previously is real. And when you were imagining it, you're closing the gap between you and that moment. You basically compress time and space into almost nothingness, because in your mind, if you saw that living room, then your eyes were closed. You shut out the physical world long enough to see what was in your imagination. So if you continue to do that every single day, what will happen is your envisioned reality will make its way closer and closer to you every single day. And you have to use your imagination. And I find it weird that the first moments in life, like until you're 7, is basically all programming. And I feel like in school, we're kind of fed all this stuff. So our imagination slowly dwindles away. But I'm going to give you a little bit of assurance. You always can tap into your imagination, and you can always create that reality, even if it's just for a moment or two. Use your imagination. I'm telling you, you'll be surprised at what you find in there, and it's a wonderful thing. So I'm going to give you some more assurance real quick. I can assure you that if you continue that practice, your life will start to evolve. And if you don't believe me, I'll list my favorite people in this field of work, and you'll find more detail on how it works, how to practice in different ways, as everybody may not jive with certain practices. But, I can assure you, you got to find what works for you. I will say one of the best books to start changing your life and the way you think is Evolve Your Brain, which is written by Dr. Joe Dispenza, as well as, oh my gosh, the thought just left me. Hold on. What is that other book? Evolve Your Brain. Oh my gosh. Oh, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. That is also a very good Dr. Joe Dispenza book. Also, I have been reading one of Brian Scott's books called Reality Revolution, where this guy, I don't want to tell you the whole book, but basically it starts talking about how he had an intruder in his home, and he got shot in the back, and basically the bullet, literally almost, it didn't go all the way through. It bounced off of him pretty much. And he goes to the hospital. He checks out fine. He goes back to his house, and then he notices there's some things in his house that were never there, and nobody's been in there since the incident. Cops were circling around. They had closed it off. And while he was at the hospital, because they couldn't find the culprit, he was able to go back home, of course. But yeah, something was different about his reality. He had a lamp he had never seen before. People were talking to him the next day that would have never talked to him before, and not mentioning the incident, but it was just really weird. So I think that we can also do that. We have a capability of doing more than what we know, and it's a shame that we don't tap into that as often as we could. But I think that's part of the process, though, I guess, is basically that's what you work up to. And then once you're there, holy crap, you just know how to use your imagination to make it work for you, and use your mind. You'd be surprised at what it can do. One of the coolest things, I was thinking about this the other day, and I flew for the very first time on an airplane the first week of January 2022. Like, way to start the year, right? I've never been on an airplane. I was freaking out a little bit, and I was like, I was on my 14th, yeah, I was on my 14th imaginary event that, like, you know, possible scenarios that could happen. And I was like, okay, whatever, just get on the plane and freaking fly. So I get on the plane and I'm thinking, like, oh my gosh, at some point in time, you know, in the past, which really doesn't exist if you're a quantum mechanic, a nerd, but I was thinking, like, at some point in time when we weren't doing this, imagine how weird you would sound if you were like, we're gonna fly. Like, that would be like somebody today being like, hey, I created this door and you can, like, place it in your house, and then you place another one in, like, your grandma's house 15 miles away, and you just go through the door and pop up in her house. Like, okay, so back in the day, you gotta think, before we were flying, how crazy the Wright brothers would have sounded to people. And they did. They got ridiculed for this, and people were like, that's the devil, you can't fly, you got legs. And then they did it. Like, nobody could perceive outside of their current reality, which contained the inability to fly. So they thought. It was always there. The Wright brothers just were adventurous enough to go to their imagination and be like, hey, I think we can put us in the air. And here we are now, sitting in a metal bird in the sky, and everybody's like eating peanuts and drinking Coca-Cola. And I'm like, my first time flying, I was amazed. Luckily for me, I think somebody, like, didn't get their ticket or something, but whatever, there was an empty space, somebody was supposed to sit there and they didn't sit there, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna sit at the window then. And lucky for me, like, the lady that was a seat over was super nice, and she was like, I don't mind, go ahead, that's fine. She was like, first time flying? I'm like, yeah. And the whole time I'm, like, glued to the window, like, looking at, like, the whole process was freaking amazing. And I'm like, why is nobody else freaking out over this? Like, I was sitting near the wing, so I was looking out the window, and I just remember seeing, like, the flaps rotate and go up and down. And, like, I was trying to, you know, aerodynamics is not I'm not really interested in that. It's a cool concept, but I don't know that like I know a little bit of quantum mechanics. But I was like, yo, how fascinating is that? And then when we landed, it was even more fascinating. It was, you know, 2-hour flight, but I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I thought it was so cool that, like, at one point in time, this was perceived as impossible. So I'm like, oh, like, that's where we are now. Like, there's going to be people who come around and they're going to start doing things that we are perceiving as impossible. So everything is there in the quantum field. Literally, we are just discovering it. I always tell people that we are extremely disadvantaged to a degree because we don't understand. I mean, we do, but we don't. We don't really understand the mind. We understand the brain because it's something physical. It's something you can poke at and get a reaction and, like, measure it in charts and reports and all that. We have plenty of studies on the brain itself, but the mind is very different. And I think that's one of the most fascinating things because it's so complex. The brain itself is complex, but the mind is super complex. You have levels to it. You have the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and then you tap into things like the super mind, super consciousness, unity consciousness, Christ consciousness. If you really want to go that far, it's and of course you have different names for those particular levels, but I just think it's amazing. And it's like, man, what can we really do with our minds? I think we'd surprise ourselves, which is the fun part. It's just another creative process, you could say. But yeah. So the other night, I was thinking about something kind of weird. I don't know why, but when I'm in the shower, I tend to have these really good ideas, and that's where I get majority of my creative stuff from. Like, my art, usually the idea pops to me while I'm in the shower. But then I was thinking, and I was like, why does this happen to me when I'm in the shower and not when I'm in the bathtub? Like, normally when I'm in the bath, I'm not really thinking about much. I'm sure my brain is running a mile a minute, but I'm not, like, consciously ticking away at something. I'm just kind of, you know, chilling, relaxing, cooling out, maxing. Anyway, so when I'm in the shower, I'm my brain's just running. And I had this epiphany. I was like, yo, why does this happen to me? And then I was like, hold on a second. When you're being created, you are literally in a sack of water. We come into this world through water. And it's constantly moving around, while your mom's walking and working and singing and dancing or whatever she's doing while she's carrying, sweet little you. You're in motion, and that water's moving around and you're moving around. And when you're in the shower, the water's moving. It's got momentum. It's up against your body. It's warm, hopefully, unless you're taking cold baths, which that's cool too. But there's that same energy there. When your mom is carrying you, when your mother's carrying you in her womb, you're in this sack of water that's in motion. You are being created. But when you're an adult and you're in moving water, you are being creative. So I thought that was a really cool epiphany. Sometimes I have these really cool realizations, and then, sometimes I'm just kind of waiting for them to pop in. But I do want to give you a fun fact about the brain. I know we're just talking about the mind and the brain and the correlation between the two, as well as consciousness itself. But fun fact about the brain, short-term memory can only store just 7 pieces of information for 20 seconds. That's crazy. But your brain as a computer also can hold 2.000,000 gigabytes, or basically 300 years of TV shows. Kind of crazy. Interesting story about how powerful the mind is, though. Nick Sitzman. Super wild story, but nonetheless, it tells you just how powerful the mind is. Like I said, we have no idea what we are capable of. But Nick Sitzman, healthy guy back then, he basically gets in a train car, and it's supposed to be refrigerated. He ends up locking himself in this refrigerated box car. And the rest of the workmen had already left the site or whatever, so he's stuck in there by himself. And he was a notorious warrior. He known for the fearing everything, and literally fearing the worst. So he gets stuck in this refrigerated box car, locked in there. Everybody's gone, so of course he's probably freaking out in there, shouting, yelling, and he has his knife on him. And at some point, he starts to etch the words on the wooden floor. And what they found was he wrote, "It's so cold. My body's getting numb. If I could just go to sleep, these may be my last words." So the next morning, the crew slid open these, heavy doors of the boxcar, and Nick Sitzman was dead. So, they had to do an autopsy and everything. And this guy had every single sign that, he literally froze to death. But the crazy part is, the refrigeration unit of the car wasn't working at the time, so the temperature that it was reading was 55 degrees. So it was malfunctioning. It would have, he would have survived if he would have just calmed down. And it's kind of grimly humorous. Dark humor gets me every time. But yeah, so it had a vent in it. I guess he assumed it was airtight. You're assuming the worst case scenario. But yeah, he had the air going. It wasn't cold enough to freeze, but he literally thought himself to death. He confirmed it, and in his brain, this reality was going. But yeah, goes to show you how powerful the mind is. It's pretty nuts, actually. But yeah, use your mind for good, because you've got a powerful mechanism sitting in between your ears, and we, like I said before, we probably have no idea what we're capable of. But my lovely party goers, this is the end of the Food for Thought segment. I look forward to spending some time with you guys on the next episode. Hope I brought you some smiles, some interesting facts, gave you that food for thought. Next time we'll do a little appetizer. But anyways, I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys.